Hello. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to look at this first slide and I want you to think, what do you remember from middle school? What's happening to these falcons? I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, and 4 and what's going on. So why don't you pause the video and see what you think. So hopefully you found exactly what I did. So this first one I'm noticing the falcon is turning, right? So I go from my first falcon to my second, and this falcon's physically rotating. So it's turning in a different direction. It's been moved. It's going this direction. So our fancy, oh no, I spelled turn wrong. Our fancy math word we might say instead of turn is we would say it's rotating. Okay, or we say it's rotating. And the second one I'm looking at, and nothing's changing. It hasn't turned. It hasn't flipped over. It simply slid across my page. It just slid right over. And I would actually call this a translation. And then my final one, it looks almost as if I'm looking into the mirror of this falcon. So this mirror is looking into the falcon. This is what it's seeing. So it's been flipped, or is a reflection. So if I think about looking into the water, my reflection staring back at me, it should be the mirror image of it. So number 2 is what we're going to be looking at today specifically, and soon we'll start 3 and then move on to 1. For this next slide, I want to talk about transformations in general. So what we're going to be talking about, these 3 things as a whole are ways in which I can transform an object. Okay, so I'm looking at transformations. It's a change in one of 3 things. It could be more. It could be a change in position. So I could think about how my falcon just slid over. It could also be a change in size. So how big or small that falcon becomes. Or it could also be a total change in shape, which is pretty unusual, but it is a kind of transformation. There are 3 vocabulary words I want to cover before we move much further, before we jump into translation. So what I have, I've got pre-image, image, and isometry. So for this first word, I'm going to think of what the prefix pre means. So if you're thinking what I'm thinking, it means before, right? So I'm thinking, okay, so this is before my image. So my pre-image is the shape before it changes. So I could say before the change, before the transformation. So if I had a shape and say I created this triangle and I said A, B, C, this triangle would be named triangle A, B, C because it is my pre-image. And this will be a distinction between image. Okay, so my pre-image is simply labeled, points are labeled A, B, and C. This is before anything changes. But what happens when I have a transformation is after I've moved it, I need a new label for these. So after I've moved this, so this is after the transformation. This is what my shape is now going to look like. So say in theory I slid this triangle right down here. And now this is A prime. This little tick mark reads prime. This is how I'm going to distinguish between my pre-image and my image. So this becomes A prime, this becomes B prime, and this becomes C prime. So when I label my triangle, I'm now going to call it triangle A prime, B prime, C prime. I have to add this little prime symbol every single time I write that point. So I've got my pre-image, this shape before it's been changed, my image, this shape after the transformation, and then finally we're going to talk about isometry here. A lot of times I'll refer to this as these shapes are isometric. What this means is that my pre-image and my image are congruent, okay? So they are congruent. Remember my symbol for congruent? So I know that my image and my pre-image are congruent. So what does that mean? It means they have to have the exact same size and shape. So if I started with the triangle, my triangle cannot grow larger or smaller. It simply needs to be a triangle. And it cannot get any bigger. It has to stay a triangle. In theory, these are the same size, right? So triangle, it stays the same size and the same shape. It just simply slid over. And notice how I labeled these A prime, B prime, and C prime. If you're a little bit confused on isometry, that's okay. We'll talk about it soon. So let's start with our first transformation. So transformations is my umbrella. All of these things are transformations, but let's talk about a specific translation. Okay, so a specific translation is a slide. So I'm sliding my figure over a certain direction and a certain distance. So they're going to tell me how far, and in what way. So I'm going to go 4 over, or 4 up, or 5 down. They're going to tell me exactly where it's going to go. They're going to tell me what direction it's traveling, so left or right, up and down, and they're going to tell me the distance, how far am I moving. So for this first one, what we're going to do is we're going to complete the translation. So I know what's going to happen is my figure is simply going to slide. I'm going to label it appropriately. That's telling me I'm looking at V prime, B prime, H prime, and P prime. I'm going to list this new set of coordinates. So notice I've already listed the coordinates for V, B, H, and P, and so we're going to be listing the prime section today. So my translation, they tell me, is 2 units to the right and 4 units up. That means for every single point, I'm going to move it 2 units to the right and 4 units up. I like to do it in the order in which they give it to me. So I'm going to start with point V, and I know this is at -3, -1. And I'm going to move this point 3 units to the right. Sorry, 2 units to the right. That's what it's telling me. Okay, so I moved it 2 units to the right, and then I'm going to move it 4 units up. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. Because I've done 2 units to the right and 4 units up, this is now the location of V prime. Now you must label each of these points. I now have the location of V prime. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with each point. So I'm going to start at B, and I'm going to go 2 units to the right, 1, 2, and then 4 units up. 1, 2, 3, 4. This location is now B prime, because it's where I moved B to B prime. So my pre-image is B, my image is B prime. I'm going to do the same thing with H. So I'm going to move it 2 units to the right, 1, 2, 4 units up, 2, 3, 4. This location is now, you guessed it, H prime. And then last but certainly not least, I have P, and I'm going to move it 2 units to the right, 1, 2, and 4 units up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's my new point. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect my points. Oh, I forgot to label it. This point is now labeled P prime. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect my points with lines so that I can kind of judge and make sure that my shape still looks the same. Because if it doesn't, then I can think, oh, I've made a mistake. Okay, so my thing doesn't want to draw lines today. And I'm going to go ahead and erase some of these lines just so I can pay attention to specifically what I'm looking at. So I'm just erasing these just for my sake, just so I can see it a little bit better. You can leave them on your page. Oh, I erased my P prime. P prime. So now I'm going to look and do my shapes, with the exception of my bad line drawing. Do they look about the same? I would say, yeah, they're the same in general shape. They both look like quadrilaterals. So let's go ahead and fill in this V prime. So I'm going to notice that V prime is now located at -1, and then I go up 1, 2, 3. So this is -1, 3. B prime is located at 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is +2, 4. H prime is located at 1, 2, 3, 4, and up 1, so 4, 1. And then last but not least, P prime is located at 1, -1. So what I've done here is I've completed the translation, I labeled the image appropriately, I added my primes, and I listed my new set of coordinates. Also, what I want to recognize here is that these two shapes are isometric. They are the same size and the same shape. So I want you to turn your page over, and I want you to try this problem all on your own. I'm going to pause the video. I want you to do the same. I'm going to solve it, and I want you to check your answer. So I want you to complete the translation, label the image appropriately, and then list my new set of coordinates, just like we did before. Here's your new translation. As you can see, what I've done here is I've listed my new coordinates. I followed my translation of 2 units to the left and 2 units down. So I moved 2 to the left, 2 units down. Notice I have some overlap here on my I and my L prime. So my I on my pre-image and my L prime on my image, they are in the exact same location. And that's okay because I'm simply sliding it over. Sometimes there's going to be overlap there. So I want you to check yourself, check your coordinates, make sure you're not flipping the order of your coordinates. So once we've done this, so we feel pretty confident in being able to translate given that information, but what happens if they give it to me in a different context? So here what I'm going to notice is they're not telling me this is a translation, and they're not telling me specifically where I'm going, but they are based on this information. So anytime I see something that looks like this, I'm going to think this is a translation. So if I think about X, my X-axis is the one going from side to side, the one I'm tracing right here. So here's my X-axis. If it's telling me +3, that's telling me I should head in the direction of my positive numbers. So instead of looking at X +3, I can think of this as each point is going to move to the right 3 units. Okay, so I'm abbreviating. When I see X +3, I'm thinking this is moving to the right 3 units. And when I see Y -5, so I'm thinking Y, this is when I move up and down, right? Here's my Y-axis. Y -5, I'm going to be thinking about where are my Y values negative. Oh yeah, they're down here negative. So I'm going to think I'm going to go down 5. So instead of looking at this as saying, I have no idea what these mean, I'm going to think about where should they be trending. So X +3 means I'm moving to the right. Y -5 means I'm moving down. So I want you to try out this translation, and I want you to pause your video again, try the translation with the way that I've abbreviated it. What I've done here is I've exactly translated my shape 3 units to the right and 5 units down. So I moved each point. So I moved R 1, 2, 3 to the right and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. And I did that for every single point. I labeled it R prime, Q prime, P prime, and S prime. So I want you to turn your page over, and I want you to try this last one. I want you to brainstorm on what that's going to look like. And I want you to pause your video, and I want you to try it all on your own. Last couple of seconds, I want you to recognize, I noticed that X -4, I was thinking of my X-axis, how I move side to side, right? Here's my X-axis. And I thought, where is X negative? Oh yeah, it's negative over here, which means anytime I see X -4, I'm going to think I'm moving to the left 4. And again, I had why